Okay, so early comers, I have a little fun first slide here. So I was putting this together, I was thinking about my history with IDEs. So I've never actually been written production code that anybody's run in their hospital, so that's probably a good thing. But I've never actually majored in programming, but I have been a reluctant developer throughout my life. Going back to the 80s, and I dropped out of French. I stopped taking French so I could take a programming language class. And that was, I think we were doing BASIC and Pascal back then on Apple. One of the things that preceded the Mac Plus. I think it was Apple IIe. And then not the best UI. But then in college, I was lucky enough to get a Mac Plus and start playing around with HyperCard, which was actually a pretty great development environment. We're still trying to take stuff from that every now and then. And rest in peace, Bill Atkinson. He passed away this year, right? So HyperCard was designed by Bill Atkinson, one of the most influential developer experience programmers in our lifetime. And then I went into GIS. I actually majored in economics and went into environmental consulting, and I was the guy who knew about computers and got put in front of a geographic information system that only ran on a couple Unixes. One of them was Sun SPARC and so got to play around with that. Well, one thing about this company, ESRI, which is a lot like InterSystems, but in another field, is that they had this great programming language called Arc Macro Language, another similarity to InterSystems, a little proprietary language, and great built-in documentation, and you could just sort of, run stuff right out of the documentation. It's a pretty great developer experience there. And then we moved into modern times, and I went into Java and UltraEdit. Who remembers UltraEdit? Putting together this presentation, I just went on their website, and they're 30 years old now. It's amazing. A text editor, basically, that stood the test of time. And then as we got into the 2000s, actually slightly before 2000, we hit a little bit of C# development, and we started getting nice helpers in our IDEs to have object-oriented things appear and help us design GUIs better. And then we got into maybe some feel the dark days of Eclipse, but that really brought us into a plugin architecture in a big way. Whereas I think in C#, Microsoft would give you plugins a little bit, but having a really vibrant third-party developer ecosystem of plugins and the ability to work in different languages, building an IDE in which you didn't know what the extensions were going to do, I think Eclipse really led on that. And then about 4 years ago, we decided to standardize on this new IDE with a plugin architecture called VS Code. And it's turned out to be pretty good. I think everybody has been pleasantly surprised at how great a decision it's been. The usage of VS Code has only increased since that time. And I think over half of developers in the world have some familiarity. It might not be their primary IDE, but over half of the developers in the world use VS Code at least a little bit. And so this presentation is going to be a lot about not really a project, but we're going to talk about all the extensions that I think it behooves you to take advantage of and use in your daily work, along with the ones that we create ourselves and offer to you to use ObjectScript so that you can create great full stack projects. So I'm not going to actually go through the project that gets built here, but there is a GitHub repo, kind of an older one that we're polishing up, which combines a little bit. The idea was it to be an intro tutorial to everything InterSystems technology, so there's a little bit of C, a little bit of Python, and a little ObjectScript. And we're also working on finalizing a version which is all pure Python, just as sort of a proof of concept that you can do full stack development with only Python on the InterSystems platform. But first of all, this pleasant presentation is more focused on the actual extensions that I think makes your life great. And here, of course, we'll start with source control. So I personally use Git's built-in support in VS Code, maybe because I'm lazy. But I also like to use Git Lens to see annotations and code lens and a lot of good stuff there. GitHub pull requests is really good for me since I'm not a daily developer and I forget the syntax of all little commands. So I love pulling up a nice UI for handling pull requests right there in my IDE, so I don't have to move away from my code to do it. And there are a couple more that are highlighted there that I threw in a GitLab one for those of you who didn't want to be completely GitHub biased. But I haven't used that one myself. But everything I'm going to show here has over 2 million downloads at least, so they're all very popular. There's no real weird outliers here. You could probably trust using anything that's listed here. So for those of you who aren't, I hope, who doesn't use GitHub? Sorry, not GitHub. Who doesn't use Git for source control management? Okay, and those of you who don't, do you do source control management? Yes? Anybody not do source control at all? All right, good. Have we eliminated that? Great, so this is, very obviously showing you which things are deleted in red and which things are being added to this text file in green, so you can see the differences before you commit. And then you have a few little nice UI conveniences to commit and sync your repository. And that is about all I'm going to say there, because we're already 7 minutes in. I've got about 12 more extensions to get through. So a little bit about what I'm showing here, Git history. Oh, I just wanted to highlight here, one thing that people don't sometimes notice right away is that if you look down here in the bottom left at the graph of commits, this can be a really nice, if you do good comments on your, this can be a really nice way to look at the history, and especially if you're working in a team, to understand who has changed what, when. If you go and sync your repo and you want to see, and all of a sudden a bunch of files update, you might want to go and take a look at this graph to see, oh, somebody made this change and it emerged or something interesting there. It's a great way to see what's happening, which you probably don't use if you're working as an individual person day in and day out, but if you're working in a team, that's a great way to sort of take a quick peek at what's been done to your project. So on top of source code extensions, the next thing you think about is the development environment, which is probably, hopefully, containerized. Let's do another quiz. So for example, we're all InterSystems IRIS users. The database is a big part of what has to be running whenever I'm doing a project. Do you run IRIS in your laptop, or do you run it containerized? Containerized, show of hands. We're getting there, much better than a few years ago. And who runs it pretty much on their laptop? And who runs it on a centralized server? Who is doing development off a centralized server? Okay, so still mostly centralized server. And do you have conflicts with other developers hitting the same server? Do you have, if you're doing development on a centralized server, are other people using that server? And are you ever having problems with that situation? Yes. Okay, so we're still sort of spread out all over, kind of evenly. So I personally, I do end up running IRIS on my desktop a little bit too much. I'm trying to move towards complete containerized development. So there's some great built-in tools to VS Code to do that. Probably one most people are familiar with is the Docker extension from Microsoft, but I've been trying to use container tools lately, which is a little bit newer, just to try it out, see what it does. But either one, I'm just showing you this one cool feature here. Either one will show you a nice view of, for example, what image you're using in your Docker container and what ports are being mapped and used, and the volumes, little overview of basically what's in your Docker file, which is really handy. And what I couldn't show in this screenshot is if you just want to, if you want to telnet into this container, you can right-click right on that coffee company iris with the green play, so that tells you it's running. You can right-click on that and just attach shell. And I've done that so much now, I'd have to look up the command to do that by hand now, because it's just a real pain, because you have to type something with the that weird hex ID of the container, and it's a real pain. So I haven't done it in a year. So this is a really great convenience to help out your containerized development. And I can't get into, we don't have time to talk about what that means. But we should do a session on that. I think we did a workshop last year on that. Okay, so moving up the stack a little bit. So we talked about managing your source code, maybe getting an environment going with containers. First, the next thing you probably do is a little bit of SQL, create some data. So we have another extension, which is not officially published by InterSystems, but created by, now maintained by John Murray, since the original developer kind of abandoned it. But there's a SQL Tools extension which allows you to connect to various databases, and it has a plugin architecture itself. This extension has a plugin architecture, and with Oracle, Postgres, all those plugins available. So we created one for IRIS, and John Murray is helping us maintain that a little bit. And it's not the most heavyweight production SQL client that you'd want to use. You still want to use something like dbeaver or Squirrel for that kind of stuff with a real industrial strength JDBC connection. But it's really great for quick little queries. And I'll show you for a second. It's great for when you're not going to return a ton of data, or you don't need to do something really complicated with store procedures or look at query plans. If you just want to query a few rows and see what data looks like, it's awesome, because you're also in your IDE, and right next to your, you might be writing code that needs to use that data, and you just need to know what are those types? What's that data going to look like? When I get it at the code end? So this is a great way, since it's in IDE, since it's in your IDE, you can throw up the windows next to each other and just see them at the same time. So now we're starting to get a lot of stuff going on the screen. Right? We've got a Python file here doing a SQL query, doing an insertion, and I'm showing my SQL Tools output here. I did a query to show me some of the sample data that's already in there. And so I can probably do a better job of writing that, forming that query in my code, maybe get that down to a few minutes instead of an hour, getting all that syntax right by having this back and forth with my SQL. So here I hinted, now I'm starting to use the Python extension, which is just built in. I haven't had the need to really look beyond the built-in extension from Microsoft's Python and Python debugger. Can't really say much. They work great, so makes VS Code a great Python IDE as well. And now I'm going to take a little detour into Jupyter Notebooks. I'm actually going to have a big session, a whole 20 minutes later today, spent on talking about using the Jupyter Notebook extension developed by John Murray from George James Software. This is also open source, but not officially supported by InterSystems itself. So if you have any good developer cred in developing extensions, we could always use help on these. But so I'll just touch on this for now. So one thing I'm going to talk about later in the day is how everybody kind of is a data scientist at some level. Even when we're looking at data quality or trying to see if the database is broken or if it's updated right, we're doing the kinds of things data scientists do. Look for null values, look for good quality, look for broken look, if you have a name field, you don't want it to be filled with numbers. If you have a phone number field, you want to do queries to make sure that there are always 9 digits. Nothing's less than 7 digits at least. And hopefully they're all 10 digits. So all those kind of looking at the shape of data is kind of data scientist type things as well. And if you want to capture some of that stuff, there's a Jupyter Notebook extension. Usually what people do in data science, most of those people are working in Python. Theoretically, you can do data science in a language. You could even do object script-based data science type stuff. But Python is generally what people use. All the documentation out there is, around pandas or pandas-like libraries. And you're often doing it in Jupyter Notebooks, so you can do visualization right in the notebook. And we'll see more of that later. If you don't know about Jupyter Notebooks, they're great because you can write code, you can make notes about it, and you can also have charts and graphs embedded in your notebook. And one thing that's sort of underrated is that even if your data goes away, the connection goes away, those annotations and the markdown and the graphs are saved in the notebook, and they will be there even if they no longer have a connection to the data. So it's a way of, as it was invented, it was a way to sort of make carry on past for the data, or past the life of the experiment itself. And so this extension does some very cool things, not only Python, but you can also do SQL or object script or mix them all in a single notebook. But some of those features are a little bit beta quality at the moment, so buyer beware, or user beware. So this is just a quick little example of doing SQL through Python, putting that into putting the results of that SQL query into a data frame, and from there you would start to work with it like you would just use regular pandas documentation and start working with your data frame. Okay, now I'm going to get into a little bit of what we have available and supported in production. Server Manager. So we have the Object Script Extension Pack for those of you who haven't been around a little bit. Object Script Extension Pack consists of 3 extensions that we support. One is Server Manager, and the other 2 are the Object Script Language Server, which you'll never see. It's kind of invisible behind the scenes, doing a lot of important work. And the Object Script Extension, which gives you the syntax coloring and some of the really in-your-face features. And this is so Server Manager basically does what it says. It was modeled after the Windows tool that we've had forever, which just stores server configurations. This one does the same thing, but it's only in VS Code. So it's operating system agnostic, which is good, but it's not IDE agnostic. But it's portable from Windows, Mac, and Unix. Cool thing that it does, which is very important, is that it stores your passwords in the OS level encryption, whatever encryption library or OS or tool your OS uses. So in Mac, it's Keychain. In Windows, it's, I don't know. I haven't used Windows lately. What is it? Windows Key Store or something? But you don't have to worry about it. You can get to everything through object script, through the extensions in VS Code. And what's nice about this is not only can the object script extension use your InterSystems IRIS configurations, but other extensions can also request access to use the configurations that you've stored in that extension. So it's a one place to store. As a developer, you may be connecting to 10, 20 servers. Who knows how many you use on a monthly basis? Put in place all the descriptions and get at them through all your extensions from there. And the flagship extension Object server plus a language server. What am I showing here? Who is not familiar with the object-script extension pack? Okay, so good. Most people you're in the right room. So object-script extension pack, like I said, a few extensions, but the main purpose is to give you a great experience with our proprietary language object-script. And obviously syntax coloring is the first thing people look for, but over time we've developed really great inline documentation ways to expose all the things you'd want to know about your code. Here we're showing, as I hover over %csp.rest, here is the documentation on that class showing up right there. Inline references are all throughout your code. We also support your own code. If you have a package that you've created, if I was hovering over one of my own packages, it would also show any documentation I had written on that. I didn't do a great job of documentation, so I didn't hover over my code. But there's a lot of capabilities the language server offers, which are incredibly important. That was actually really, well, I won't get into that, but VS Code was a great environment to choose as our flagship IDE because it had language server support. And being a server-side language, we're unusual in that. You can't just compile your object-script code with no server running. Unlike you can do with Python or C, you can write code and compile it without any server running. You can't do that with InterSystems. Code has to be compiled on a server. And so language server really helps us make that experience good. Just show another feature. Who has used the REST debugging feature in the object-script extension? We got one. Okay, it's not as frightening as you might think. So if you build, who builds REST services? Okay, so you should really try to take advantage of this feature. It's really easy. I was a little afraid of it first too, but it's hard to debug REST services, right? You have to be in the middle of a request to catch that request and take a look at what's happening. Our extension makes it really easy. Set that up, you set a breakpoint, you run it. Very easy to set up the debugging, and it's probably the easiest experience for doing REST debugging that I've seen. Much better than sending back fake responses. So try to check that feature out. And if you want a demo, Brett Saviano is the main developer of our VS Code extensions, and we hang around the Tech Exchange most of the week. Happy to show you all this stuff. So I'm going to end. We're going to have lots of time for questions here too. So I'm going to finish the formal part with the final extension. I picked Vue.js to develop if you didn't notice, I was building up a full stack application here. I added data, I built the middleware, REST API middleware to call the data, and then I have a front end here, which is written in Vue.js because I wanted to try it out. Could be Angular, could be React. This just shows you how VS Code also has terrific support for even less familiar front-end development frameworks, but terrific experience with Vue.js. And so from beginning to end, you can pretty much stay in a single IDE and have the best integration, I think, over my 30 years in this business I've seen. As I said, as I started, I'm working on putting up the GitHub repos for all this code. in a repo called Coffee Cup. You're working on roasting coffee beans and putting them in an online store. So the repo is called Coffee Co. And Coffee Co-py will be ready soon. I got COVID last week, so I didn't quite get it all ready for this conference. But these two repos will be kind of like a nice little learning template you could use as a starting point to think about how to do your own full stack apps if you need to. Okay, I'm opening up for questions. Anything you'd like me to go deeper into? Or any extensions that you have questions on?
I could offer another extension suggestion, which is what we call bookmarks. There isn't a bookmark feature native within VS Code. It's pretty handy to be able to bookmark it, place in documents and move around, and then jump back to those, particularly if you're working with a big code base.
Yeah, I use that a lot too. How many people here are already use VS Code? So everybody? Anybody else angry? Anybody angry that we don't use IDEX and something else? I set that up wrong to embarrass you. Is everybody very happy with any studio users? So pretty much everybody's doing both right now. So a lot of people still using both VS Code and Studio, sounds like. I mean, any problems eventually saying goodbye to Studio? Yeah, you could talk. You could come up here and.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about BPL DTL, right? Yeah, so starting with IRIS 2025.1, we have a new version of the DTL editor that supports integration in VS Code. For business rules, that's been supported with the newer version of the rule editor since 2023.1. New version BPL editor is being developed right now by developers on my team. We don't have a target when that will be ready, but when it's ready, it'll support integration with VS Code right from the start. And what that looks like in VS Code is a little bit different than Studio, so there's no more like separate document name, like you click on like .bpl or .dtl. Basically, you just open the class, and then you can, there will be a little like code lens, like a little piece of text above the X data block saying reopen in graphical editor. You click that, graphical editor comes up. If you're using like server-side editing, like Studio, all the changes obviously automatically are already synced with the server, and it's supported for client-side local editing too. So if you're editing a local file on your file system and you want to open the graphical editor, make some changes, save it there, it'll automatically get synced to your local file system, so it'll show up in Git or whatever source control you happen to be using. So yeah, that's under development. DTL's there already. Obviously, you unfortunately do have to upgrade to get it. But yeah, we know it's a gap, and that'll be closed pretty soon.
So with those interoperability tools, nobody will want to stay on Studio anymore. Right? Yes, all right. Any other, anything else? You have us here for 10 more minutes if you want it.
So I have a question. I'm John Murray. I have a question for people who are using VS Code. Any of you starting to use Copilot or similar code helpers? What's your experience of it so far? Do you want to comment on that? Or?
you wanted to comment. I seem to have enabled it, but I think I enabled it by accident. And I found it's more like a bad backseat driver rather than a co-pilot, because it was very verbose and putting out stuff which, no, I didn't want. I got confused. Sometimes it was good, whereas it was really simple, but yeah, I didn't find it very, very intelligent. That's my feedback anyway.
Do we have a comment up here?
On the Python context, then for InterSystems environment, and it worked for creating Excel documents from pandas frames like a charm. You just put on your node, I want to do that, I want to have the column titles marked this and that way, and I want auto filters on, and I want all that stuff. Before you look up the documentation, you can just write a comment, and the library is well known to the GitLab Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and it just implements it. It's really easy. So for that, it's good. I have not so much experience using it with InterSystems context. Yeah.
Thanks for asking that. That's a good area to talk about. So we're not officially developing any Copilot support. That tool, GitHub Copilot support. We have the kiosk here, people asking for your opinion on a tool called Ask Me, which is from the documentation team, which is designed to help give you good code snippets out of that. So that's another way you can go. It's outside of the IDE. But if you use our built-in documentation tool to ask it a question like, how would I iterate in object script over a SQL result set? It should give you good code snippets for things like that. It should give you good code snippets for, I guess, ideally. So go test it out and give us feedback. But that's sort of out of band, but that one would be more targeted at, it would be based on an InterSystems specific LLM versus who knows how GitHub Copilot builds up its knowledge base from whatever amount of object script is in GitHub, probably. Okay. Well, I think that will do it. Barring any other questions, thanks for coming. And a little bit on developer sessions. So after this at 4:30, Stefan Wittmann, another product manager I work with, will be talking about pure Python development. And after that, I'll be doing my data science talk, a short talk, more around 5:30, I think. Thanks for coming.